welcome to the 9 June 2022 Salt Lake City Council work session meeting. We welcome the members of the public who are in person and who may be watching usual video feeds online. Hybrid council meetings allow people to join online through WebEx or in person at the city and county building. We are continuing to watch COVID rates to make the safest choice for all of us. In fact, although masks are no longer required in the building, since COVID cases are rising, we encourage people to wear masks while here in our meetings. There's some in the hallway if anyone needs to use one. We will continue to monitor the situation and take any reasonable precautions for the public and staff. Our agenda today is to focus on the continuing to review and discuss the mayor's proposed fiscal year 2022 to 23 budget for each city department. Today's meeting will help us, the council, discuss, review, and ask final questions about this proposed budget in order for us to prepare our final decision for budget adoption on Tuesday, June 14th. As many of you know, there's no public comment during the work session. However, please join us on the June 14th, 2022 at the 7 p.m. formal meeting for the public comment opportunity. We encourage the public to continue providing feedback to the City Council on our budget up until June 14th or any other general topics by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City 84114, emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, calling our 24-hour phone line 801-535-7654. Today in person you have 4 council members, and then you also have 2 council members on join us via WebEx. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening, or this afternoon, I guess. Mm-hmm. And we will move on to item number 1, fiscal year 2022 to 23 budget, unresolved issues, follow up. We have Jennifer Bruno, Ben Lutke, Allison, Roland, and Sylvia as needed here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I sent updated information to the council last night about some preliminary property tax information we received from the county. I think I want to emphasize that this is preliminary information. It hasn't been officially finalized yet in the state website, and it has swung wildly. So I think that that's the giant caveat that I want to make sure I emphasize with the council, that right now, as of preliminary data, the new growth that the city would be entitled to receive is $2.4 million, which is just about $2.1 million over what is in the mayor's recommended budget. Because if you remember, the mayor's recommended budget had a small c conservative estimate for new growth, because last year's new growth calculation was unexpectedly low, and it required us to sort of rebalance the budget, cutting things at the last minute, which is not a fun experience. So this year we have the opposite experience. I wanted to caution the 2.4 million because hours before I sent that email last night, new growth was $900,000. So I think that hopefully that can illustrate for the council the order of magnitude that it can swing until those numbers are listed as finalized. But it is good news, and it's more money than is in the mayor's recommended budget. And so now the council can decide what to do with that money. I've listed some options. Of course, there are other options that the council could consider that might not be on this list. The council could, and this is in addition to where the council ended as of the last discussion, which was about $400,000 essentially in the green. So $400,000 where revenue exceeded expenses. And so, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
Jennifer, yeah. Just to demonstrate how tentative it is,
yeah.
Was there not a year where they told us it was final and then had to come back and tell us, whoops, it isn't?
Yes.
So really anything can happen even after they say it's final.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. And so in the past, the council, what's been helpful is for the council to identify like a line item where you would make that adjustment if we did receive that kind of last minute news. So the 2 easiest line items, just to be frank, are fund balance or CIP. Those are line items where if there's a $5,000 swing or if there's a $10,000 swing, it's easy to adjust those items. So the options that I've listed for the council, and I don't know if this would be a good time to share sort of the tracking sheet. So this is the sheet that shows where the council is in the positioning of positive or negative. If I take out this new growth, this is where the council was as of the last discussion, $410,000 in the green. But with this new growth, obviously that takes it to 2.4 million in the green. So among the options for the council to consider, you could reconsider the reductions that the council made in the Public Lands Department, those 2 FTEs. You could reduce the amount of fund balance that's used to balance this year's budget. Currently, this budget proposes to use $25.2 million from fund balance to balance the budget. So if you reduce that with that 2.4 million, you would be kind of furthering your goals of aligning ongoing revenue with ongoing sources. So to the extent that you use fund balance to balance this year's budget, it creates problems in future years, right? We've talked about the structural deficit thing. So you could decide to use this money to reduce your reliance on fund balance, if hopefully that makes sense.
Sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
Mr. Chair, so new growth is something that we can count on. If that's the number, we can count on it. This is not one time.
It is ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Ongoing.
So next year,
Yes.
our budget
Would include that.
would include that.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, that's a great clarification. Thanks. The amount of money from new growth is ongoing revenue in perpetuity for the city to use.
Okay.
So,
Jennifer?
go ahead. Sorry, did I hear another question? Oh, thank you, Alejandro. Sorry.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
sorry, I'm a little lost.
Go ahead.
Jennifer, you mentioned the two FTEs on the public lands. I remember that we sort of combine two into one. Which one am I missing?
That's correct. You straw polled to reduce those 2 FTEs and combine them into one. And so if you wanted to reconsider that decision, you could just leave the 2 FTEs and not combine them into one. Sorry, I should have phrased it that way instead.
Oh yeah, it just made it sound to me, and again, I'm very different since this is my second language, but it made it sound to me that there were 2 FTE reductions on the public lands, but that is as of for the straw poll, basically as 1 FTE reduction. But yeah, thank you.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I think about it that way because in our tracking sheet, we reduced both and then we added 1. So sorry, it was not straight in my own mind.
Mr. Chair, can I ask another question?
Yes.
So, Jen, so that me and the public is following where the budget is going, so can we slightly give us a brief summary of what the mayor proposed, right, with all of the tax increase, immunity, all of the things that she's listed as increase, so that we can fund the $422 million budget or whatever it is. And now that we have, new growth, do we still need a tax increase? Because I can remember the tax increase equaled $4 million, $2 million. I don't remember.
Right. The tax increase, so there were several segments of it.
Okay.
So what was proposed in the mayor's recommended budget was sorry, I'm going to pull up the exact amounts. $4.3 million for, actually $4.4 million for general city operations.
Okay.
$2 million for property tax stabilization. $4 million for governmental immunity.
Okay.
And then separate from the city, $2.7 million for the library. And I'll get to that area next. The library also receives new growth to the extent they do, and so I'll get to that when we're done talking about the cities.
Okay.
Because the council has options with regard to the library's budget as well.
Okay.
And just to also, Councilmember Vonderhaus, in the mayor's budget, they estimated on the conservative side of $364,000 in new growth.
Right.
So that number is already in there. the funding that we're looking from the new growth from the county, we're going to take that out already. So that's where that $2.4 million comes from now. We're adding that to that.
Right. So I think that it would be accurate to say that this new growth revenue that we know now would not be sufficient to eliminate the need for a tax increase. One option the council could consider is reducing the tax increase, or, like we were saying before, even with the tax increase, this budget relies heavily on one-time revenue to balance. And so the council could decide to reduce the amount of one-time revenue you're using to prevent future year tax increase needs. So I think that it's a policy choice that the council can make, and both are valid options.
And when you say one time, you mean our sales taxes one time or our ARPA funding one time?
In addition to ARPA, this budget uses $25 million from fund balance, which is basically the city's savings account.
Savings account.
Yeah, so the city's using its rainy day fund to balance the budget this year. And part of the proposal from the mayor, the city would have had to use even more one-time revenue to balance the budget were it not for the property tax increase proposal. And so this opportunity there's an opportunity for the city to have more ongoing, or align ongoing revenue and ongoing expenses more closely. But either is an option.
I'm going to let Chris talk. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have to, I've had to ask this questions many times myself. And so Jen, if you could explain for people that are tuning in from the public, why then is there, like if the city doesn't change, basically about the misunderstanding about what new growth means versus what keeping the tax rate, property tax rate the same, and how that doesn't automatically fluctuate. Because it might sound to people tuning in like if you're getting this new growth and that's not one time, it's ongoing, then can't you just fund everything by keeping tax rates the same and just waiting for more new growth next year to do the things that you want to do? Is that
right? Yeah, I think I can take a little bit of a crack at that. So, and please jump in and tell me if it's not making sense. So I think one clarification to make is that new growth revenue comes from property taxes generated by fully new buildings. So it is not from someone's house increasing from $400,000 to $500,000. The city is not allowed to collect any more money from that. The city is allowed to collect more money when a piece of property goes from having a small shopping strip mall on it to having a 40-story office building on it or residential tower on it. So that is new growth. And according to state law, the state allows the city to have that as increased budget for the city's increased revenue for the city's property tax budget. So because it's new people, essentially, new people paying for things, not existing people paying more. If you look at this year's budget, I think it's a good example of new growth is never enough money to pay for the year-over-year increases in the cost to run a city. So our total needs for this year's budget were, let's say $30 million for sake of argument compared to last year. So we needed $30 million more to pay for the needs to run the city. New growth helps us pay for some of that, but obviously not all of it. So we rely on growth in sales tax revenue, and in this year we've relied on fund balance and ARPA dollars to help us keep pace with that cost. And in my years at the city, that new growth revenue is not very reliable. it's not as obvious as one might think to say, oh, I see a bunch of cranes in the city, therefore we must be making tons and tons of money. It never quite materializes exactly the way we can plan on it. And so, and I think there was a staff report that included the history of our new growth revenue, and it's fluctuated everywhere from negative $10,000 to positive $3 million, and sometimes $0. And last year it was $300,000. And so I think that fluctuation is another thing that makes it hard to count on that year over year. Once you get it, now that we have the 2.4 million, we will keep it in perpetuity. But it's planning on it to cover increased expenses each year that is difficult. Does that, Chris, did that somewhat
Yes,
address
that was one of your best ones so far. Thank you. You did great.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Councilmember Mono.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, two quick questions. One, if I'm understanding new growth correctly, the fact that we have a lot of RDA project areas in the city also means that new growth number is small, because the new growth would be directly proportional to whatever formula we have that goes to the RDA versus the city. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We don't collect new growth from RDA project areas, but
We have some pass-through, right?
we have some pass-through, which helps. I think that we were actually helped a little bit this year, and Danny, director of the RDA, highlighted it after we had the
Project Sunset.
State of Downtown. A lot of the projects that were highlighted in that State of Downtown are outside RDA project areas. They're immediately adjacent to RDA project areas, but they're outside project areas, which benefits the city in a way, because the city collects that new growth rather than the RDA. Does that make sense?
Does that 2 point whatever million, or the number that we got from the county, does that mean, is that inclusive of the pass-through RDA, the one
No.
that would go through the RDA and then pass through to us?
No.
No, so
Separate.
there would be a little bit more from that we expect.
And that's already in the RDA budget. So, and it's reflected in the budget here. I think they're anticipating $1.5 million more pass through from the RDA. I could be wrong on that. So
The
I'll confirm
RDA,
that.
do we also have
and
this?
we don't get that exact amount until March of the following year, which is another complicating factor. But
Oh, that's right. Okay. And then my next question is, you said, okay, we can take this new growth money and better align our ongoing expenses with ongoing funds. Better align is, how close to aligned is better aligned? Is it still
It
very,
would
very
take
far
it-
away?
it's very far away.
Okay.
Like 20, what?
It's more than 25 million,
$27
because the 25 million is just the amount you're taking from fund balance. That does not factor in the 14 million in revenue replacement that you're using from ARPA. So it's 14 million plus 25 million.
So the problems, if we're calling them problems, or the concerns that existed are not gone because of this.
Right.
They still exist, and
Right.
the need for additional tax increase either now or in the future does not go away because of this.
True.
Would be fair, right? That's
Yes,
a fair
that
statement.
would be accurate.
It chips away at it, but
Chips
it
away.
doesn't eliminate it. Councilmember Baltimore,
Yeah.
Cindy, can you make
One
one more
more-
comment?
I understand, but I think it's important, sorry, Dan, but I think it's important that we keep having this, at least for me and for the public, to understand what we're seeing, because, yeah, we need to go through all of the lists and stuff, but essentially the public needs to understand, and ourselves, what big numbers are we working on and deciding on ultimately if we're going to do it or not. So, so the $25 million that we're using from fund balance, so from our savings, money that we had left over from last year, where does that leave us? We will still be able to have some savings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And also, where are we going to come up with $25 million next year?
That's a good question.
Okay. So how much
And
do we
that's
have
and
left
that's the
over?
concern of
Right.
using one-time money, is that you have to answer that question next year.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, yeah. But even with this increase that the mayor is proposing, we won't reach $25 million.
Right.
Okay. So, see, that's a huge concern. And I think that's in my basic understanding, that's where, where we are, the system is so that we exist and try to exist within our means in a way, and try to squeeze, and sometimes you have to cut certain things because we cannot pay for it.
Right.
So I wanted to make that clear, because we're funding again with like savings and ARPA, and I understand there's labor increases, like costs, like that's a cost that we can never like reduce unless we cut like certain positions or a lot of positions, but it's, we need to be really mindful of that, and that's why I still have this a little bit of a heartburn on we're spending money from savings or spending money in taxes, and we still won't have any money for next year to cover that. So
Can I make,
yeah, go ahead.
so I agree with you. We need to make sure that we're spending our money wisely and on the fund balance and the property tax side of the house. The current fund balance, or the current budget, also is conservative on the sales tax numbers. The reason why our fund balance was at such a high mark was our sales tax well exceeded what our budget had in it. This year, our sales tax budget is on the conservative side, and it's rightfully on the conservative side. So if we do as well as we have done in the last few months, that fund balance will be more, and it'll be closer to, maybe not to 25 million, but it'll be, at least still be a bigger chunk of it, because our minimum of fund balance is 10%. We're closer to 16.5 to 17%. So we do have some room in there to move to help support our budget for next year.
And yes, sorry, that's a good reminder. When we discussed with the finance department the kind of 3-year projection, that includes next year also using the city savings account. So it's using the city savings account for multiple years, because the city savings account is so healthy, because we had so much sales tax revenue over our budget this last year. That we weren't anticipating.
So that's why if we have, and I'll get to it in a second, that's why if we have the additional money that comes in above the mayor's estimate of 364, if you move that to fund balance, that'll allow us to have that extra revenue to use for that ongoing, for that fiscal health of allowing us to use it for next year, because now we'll have more there.
But we won't have enough still.
Oh, we may not have enough still, but we would have
So-
close
and-
enough.
And there are other line items in the budget that I think would be obvious to cut next year,
Okay.
because they're so high this year. And the obvious one in my mind would be CIP. So that you're funding it at 9% this year, which is the most I've ever seen it in my years here. And that is an ongoing need. Obviously, every year you need to fund CIP, but that is one of those like natural balancing figures that if the revenues aren't quite enough, that's one of the things that gets cut.
Okay.
Chris,
So-
I'm going to,
Sorry, no, okay, CIP, but CIP are also important things that the public expects
Yep.
to, with their tax dollars to see and happen, like things that need to happen, right? So it feels like, what's a term that that politicians use, a big government? Like we have a lot of things going on and we cannot afford it. And then we are like, well, let's just not do things, but still keep our big administration, if you will, And that's something that concerns me. Like we need to steer back to less spending, more conservative budgeting, and also know that next year, for sure, there will have to be cuts if we decide to go this route this year. Like we will have to. We can't keep spending this much if we don't have the money. I just feel uncomfortable with that.
okay,
Thanks.
Chris, one second here. I'm going to let Cindy make a clarification. I'll go to Chris, then Councilmember Pui.
Just in the spirit of clarity for the public, and adding to what council members and Jennifer have said, just want to be clear that we've used the word extra in a few cases, and I think all the other words really point out that there isn't anything that is extra. We may call it extra in this conversation because it's something that we didn't already budget for or something like that, but extra isn't a term that is really relevant here. It's just what we're talking about, moving money and where it can go and where it can't go. So just a couple of examples. If the new growth does materialize, the 2.1 million, that's beyond what was projected, and thank you to the administration for being conservative in their estimates, or we would be in a real mess. So if this new growth does materialize next year, in case the public could have the misimpression, but you would not start the year with an extra $2 million next year. So no matter with or without that revenue, every year when the budget process starts, there's a gap in what it would cost to continue just the existing programs that take place. So sometimes that's $10 million, sometimes it's more or less than that, but it's a huge task to right-size the programs and budget to be within the revenue or within the achievable revenue. And I also wanted to point out the $1 million that was mentioned from RDA as something that is a good thing for the city. It is already, though, in the balanced budget, so that isn't extra either. And then on the sales tax, and I know you guys all know this, I'm just clarifying for public. And then the sales tax is not like property tax. Once you have property tax revenue, you continue really to get that on an ongoing basis. Sales tax, there's a base amount that you do, but when you have a big peak in sales tax, you can't count on that in future years. Is that?
Yes, that's
Okay.
accurate.
So those were my little thoughts to add to the public understanding.
Councilmember Wharton.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if this is a question or an argument or just a statement, so I'm just going to do my best. And I'll say that I think that I totally understand the concerns that Councilmember Valdemoros raised, and I think that as good public stewards of tax dollars, we should always be asking, like, is this drifting away from our lane or our mission as the city, the services that we provide, et cetera. I think those are good and healthy questions to ask. Where I would disagree is that we're not in this position because anybody did anything wrong or because we overspent or that we're like existing within our means, like with very, very few exceptions of like a couple pretty small, what I would say relatively small programs to the budget. Like we're in this position because that this is the cost of doing business and running the city that is growing. And like, for example, even though we're adding alternative response models, it's not like those calls are new or those calls aren't going to come in if we don't add an alternative response model for policing, right? Like we're still going to get those phone calls. We're still going to have to send police out. Police are just not the best people, and it's not the best use of resources to send an officer when there isn't a crime that's been committed. So like we're not making government larger. Our role is to respond to those calls, and our job as council members is to figure out the best way, the most economical way to do that. And so in that sense, like we're not adding a new program because we have to respond to emergencies. The same is true for a lot of the other areas like parks. Like in order to maintain parks at the level of service that we have them, and in order to bring on the new trails and the new parks to accommodate the growth of our city, we have to have more money. We're not adding parks, right? We're not adding parks as a concept to our city mission. We've always done parks. That's always been within our purview. we need more money to maintain the current level of service. And so I know that there are a few like programs here and there, like in sustainability, talking about doing, you know, a new program about food equity, and you know, there are some new positions that we're hiring, but I don't see from this budget anywhere where we're fundamentally growing government artificially. Like we have to continue to respond to a city to one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and we have to continue to deliver the level of service that our residents are not only expect, but the increases in service that they are asking for.
Thank you, Chris. Councilmember Pui?
And I don't know what this is, and I will also say it. When I see this budget, and when we see the numbers here, the numbers are telling us what the city is needing. We either stop giving our employees a cost of living update on their wages, or we stop funding government immunity, which that will be all sorts of disastrous, or we stop deferred maintenance in our buildings, or we stop traffic calming or reduce CIP applications, or we stop funding our firefighters and the growth that they need, or we stop funding the extra HR, employees that they need, or we stop funding the alternative response for policing, or we stop, adding the people that parks and open space needs to maintain our parks. Or we stop funding our IMS to protect us from cyber attacks. So I think that living within our means is a charged word. I believe that we do need to be careful, and we are. We are doing the work here. We have found savings. We have found things that we think that we need more information on. But where are the savings to prevent this city from a tax increase? Let's find it. If any of us find it, please. And I'm not saying that as a mean way. Like, if you find the money to not make a tax increase in this city and to maintain this level of service that our neighbors want, I will be more than happy to support that. But as a stand, I believe that this is a solid budget and it's not wasteful. Yes, we're going to be making changes. I believe that I feel strongly about, but for the most part, this is a very solid and strong budget that represents the values of the neighbors of Salt Lake.
Thank you, Councilmember Petro.
I'd like to beat my particular dead horse, which is, while I agree that I am much more at peace with the amount of this budget that we're going after, even though it makes me nauseated to think of a $25 to $40 million hole we have to fill next year without raising taxes. We owe it to every constituent who will have a tax increase, to ourselves, to the people working for us, to work as efficiently as possible and to create the metrics. We have a lot of new investments, and no matter how brilliant the people planning the programs are, no matter how well modeled they are on other forms of success, they will always require us to be insightful and vigilant and to measure their success in objective ways that determine future investment. And we need to make that a huge priority as soon as we're done with the budget, to get these metrics in place as soon as possible, so that the conversations are no longer about what I'm feeling about this or what I perceive about it, but what are the actual needs that our city has, and how well are we using each dollar that we are stewards over to respond to those needs in specific ways.
Thank you for the comments. Jennifer, back. I think we still didn't get through all of your
Right, the options. So I'll bring this back. So reconsider the FTE changes in public lands. Reduce the amount used from fund balance. You could decide to deposit that amount into the CIP fund, because as I mentioned, it's easy to adjust. Like, let's say if the new growth final new growth is $1.7 million instead of $2.4 million, the CIP fund could always use more money. Additionally, kind of a corollary to the CIP fund, Ben confirmed with finance that there is $152,000, just over $152,000 to recapture from dormant CIP accounts that are over 3 years old, projects that are no longer, they're closed or they're not going forward, for the council to recapture. In previous years, you've recaptured it and put it back into the CIP fund because it's one-time money. But anyway, so you could put 2.4 million or some portion of it into CIP to fund some of the projects that aren't recommended for funding, or you could reduce the amount of the proposed tax increase. So those are kind of the general options that staff sees on the table. But obviously, any questions?
Councilmember Mono.
Is now the appropriate time to discuss those options?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to discuss the public lands FTEs. And I have a different idea than what you put on there. I think that our decision to reduce those 2 FTEs to 1, as far as I understand what those FTEs are for, I would like to stick with that decision. And as the Fisher Mansion gets up and going and we can actually see a more demonstrated need, I would be okay considering bringing those back in the next budget year. The FTEs that I would consider putting money towards is trying to get at least a portion of those groundskeepers to be full-time and not seasonal. Because I think that, to me, is, and I know that it's a $2 million need, at least in the presentation is $2 million to get all of the groundskeepers. I'm wondering if there's an option where we can get like a third of the groundskeepers to stay on for the whole year and give them benefits and allow them to work through the winter and maintain some things. I see Kristen's here, so. And I think it's for multiple reasons. I am very interested in that. One being that I think our parks don't shut in. I know that our parks do not shut in the winter, and we still need to maintain the grounds in the winter. There's a lot of maintenance that I hope those people could be doing to catch up in the winter, but also that's trying to stabilize that base of the pyramid. And I, just on a personal note, I interacted with one of the groundskeepers at the cemetery the other day, and this individual said they started as a seasonal, they were moved over, and I was like, oh, do you like your job? And he said, you guys have me for 40 years. I'm going to be here for the rest of my career. And that really touched my heart. And I thought those people that are dedicating their lives to maintaining our parks really start at that lower level. And I think at this point, we can't get people to start at that lower level because there are too many other jobs, entry-level jobs, that are available that are full-time, not seasonal, and have benefits. We need to compete with those other jobs. And so I want our entry level into our city employment system to be competitive. And so I'm worried that right now, with it just being seasonal and we're not offering full benefits, we're not competitive anymore.
Are you thinking of making this an intent? Or because it's at this level, because it's unknown where
well, we have this chart. It's 2.382 million, which is a convenient number, but that would be putting all of the park staff, all the groundskeepers to full-time rather than seasonal, is my understanding. But I don't see why we couldn't do half of them or something like that. Half of them become full-time, and then we still have some seasonal. But Kristen might know a reason why we can't.
Thanks. Yeah, we could do any number that you wanted to. If that's the wishes of the council, we'd be happy to look at whatever number you have and let you know how many staff we could convert for that number.
Councilman Poe, I think, did you just have your hand up?
I just wanted to, the need on the parks is great, and everybody knows about this. Even in the winter, when we have trees collapse and branches, and unfortunately our staff is struggling because sometimes we don't have enough people to go pick up all those branches, and we still have some branches in some of the parks and some public spaces, and I think this could actually make a big difference. I don't know how big we want to go on this, but I think moving the needle in the right direction to show the neighbors that we are on top of our parks will make a big difference.
Councilmember Petro.
I think whatever we prioritize, we have to prioritize those things that will create revenue for the city. Permitting processes are very difficult. Planners, I don't know. I never dreamed we would be in this position where we could even be having this conversation. So I haven't drilled down. But while I am in full support of parks and agree that they're important to our enjoyment, I'm also cognizant that we have got to have new growth in this city in order for us to eventually balance a budget and keep people employed. And so I really would like to see us prioritize those things that are going to generate revenue. Additionally, I'm going to say something that's going to make everyone in the building hate me, and city government is officially now going to hate me. I would like us to enter into like a 2 to 3 year cycle where we contract an external audit for each department to ensure that we're being as efficient as possible. I am not saying people are not being mindful, but when you're in the weeds doing things, sometimes we miss efficiencies. And this is a practice in other industries that really does promote efficiency. I am not expecting to find anything negative. I think we have the best staff on the planet, but I really do want us to put our money where our mouth is and to commit ourselves to working smarter and harder. And I would like to see us put money towards audits or whatever we decide is the most succinct way to get to that efficiency.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez.
I appreciate Victoria saying that. I think, like she said, and me as a business owner, sometimes when you're so into the business, working within the business, you're not working on your business. So you need that external help that will look at your whole program and see where the inefficiencies are and where to cut and where to invest, right? So, and I think I've talked about this before, but I'm glad that Victoria brought it up again, and I would be in support of that as well, to like have a relook of each department on how they're doing, periodically. Thank you.
And I'll, kind of on the same lines, I'm all in favor of supporting our parks and making sure they're maintained properly and healthy and safe for our residents. I just don't feel this is the time to be adding more positions or changing them from a seasonal to a FTE. I think it takes a little bit more deliberate thought process here, and to look at and to allow us to make sure that we have enough ongoing revenue to meet our ongoing needs, and to make sure that we have money in that fund balance to offset that. I think going full-time is of value. I don't believe this is the time to do that, and we need to have a deliberate thought process going forward on that. So are we looking for a straw poll here to keep it what? Yes. So the straw poll would be keep the current 2 FTEs down to 1 in the public lands. Oh, can I make the straw poll?
Sorry, I thought this was Councilmember Mono's straw poll, and that's not what I heard him say.
Oh.
I mean, can be 2 separate straw polls, right? So
Yeah.
I think the first straw poll is keep the 2 FTEs that we converted to 1 as we discussed earlier, would be my straw poll for that.
Sorry, say it again. Keep the 2 FTEs or keep the previous decision?
The previous decision.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute, but I want to know what the second straw poll is, because that.
Okay, the second straw poll would be to put, I guess, it would come up to about $600,000 to parks to convert 25% of their FTEs to full-time of their groundskeepers. And I am doing the math. I don't know if that's real math, but I mean, this 25% of 2.4 million.
Okay.
So.
Well, and I think that based on what Kristen said, she would return to you guys to figure out how many that would shift.
So the first straw poll,
Consolidating FTEs.
consolidating the 2 FTEs to 1.
Okay. I
Victoria?
see 4 or 5.
1, 2,
Okay.
Victoria. So that's 6-0.
Okay.
With Councilmember Fowler absent. Now the second straw poll.
Do I need to restate it?
600,000 to shift part-time groundskeepers to full-time.
That was the two FTEs.
That was just the two FTEs.
Okay. Do you stop on?
I see
Sorry, so
three.
this 600,000, where do they come from? Like in the future, from now, with this?
From
money?
the additional money that maybe from the tax,
Oh, okay,
from the.
And we already had 400,000 in our,
okay.
weren't we already 400,000 in the green
So
Yes.
before that?
That
Yeah.
is 3-3 at this time with, without Councilmember
fails.
Fowler.
Three
So that one then
fails.
fails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to return to it when Councilmember Fowler is here, or?
I'm all right.
Okay.
I'm all right doing this next budget season, but it's going to remain a priority, I think, for me.
I would like to revisit it. If it's a split vote, I think we need to vote again when we have everybody.
Okay, when Councilmember Fowler.
Okay, so I will make a note to revisit that. It makes it a little difficult to go to other options.
Mr. Chair.
I guess, sorry, go ahead. Councilmember Pui.
Councilmember-
I wanted to suggest an argument here. So I was reading about the deferred maintenance related to upgrading our parks, sprinklers and water, so we can actually shut down the grass without killing our trees when it's drought. It seems, sorry, the school is mowing the lawn right now. So it seems to me that this year might be as bad or worse than last year's as far as drought, and I think it's a trend that is going to continue, and we need to have our parks in understanding that we don't want to hurt our trees, our urban canopy, but at the same time we can actually separate and stop watering our grass, and that costs a lot of money. If I remember right, it was over $2 million needed for that. I know that is a lot of money, but I would like to make an argument to the council to put at least 10% of what they are suggesting in this budget session, which I don't know is probably going to do a lot, but I wonder if that could make a difference. Maybe turn a park into and so we don't start wasting our water, the city water ourselves, while we tell our neighbors to not waste their water. So I would like to suggest this to the council members, and maybe we can hear from parks if $200,000 will make a difference on this and turning a park into the new sprinkler system needed.
I think we have
Good thing, it's a good thing Director Riker is here.
Director Rikers to answer that question.
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Pui. So just to give some context, we have done, oh, there's my phone. We have done a little bit of work with estimating some costs of replacing irrigation systems, in particular in the Gulf area. And so we're looking at Rose Park, as you all are familiar with, and that's the last time we had it estimated, it was about 3.5 million, and that's just over 100 acres. I'm guessing that's higher at this point to do that amount. So 200,000 would be a small park, and I think that could be a great demonstration park we could look at. As you get smaller, the efficiencies get less, and so it's harder to do as much. One of the things I was thinking about when I was coming here today, I was on my bike and just looking at all the greenscapes. One of the things that we could look at is taking out some of the greenscapes and putting in xeriscape in some of the places that we care for, and then just putting drip irrigation in for trees. So we could find some creative things to do if that's something that the council was interested in.
And could we see that as a budget amendment? Because right now you wouldn't have an idea on that.
Sure, absolutely.
Councilmember Pui?
I will welcome this. I think this is something that is obviously is becoming more expensive by the minute. Obviously, it's very problematic, and we don't need our parks wasting precious water, but we also need to keep our trees and our trees healthy. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. So I think if we can find some efficiencies, and I will still make an argument that give this department some money to research this or to come up with an example or to find some efficiencies. But I don't know if there is anybody that feels strongly on this as me.
Councilmember Petro.
I'm just on my dead horse again. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to keep saying it. This doesn't feel to me like found money or new money. This feels like money that we have to allocate to the things. We have a very, very, very good budget in front of us that prioritizes so many of the things that are important. And we are going into potentially the most financially precarious moment of our shared lives. And we have got to take care of who is here. We have to prioritize the things that are going to bring revenue and new growth with this and efficiencies at home. We have to.
And to that, I want to say that water is probably one of our main needs in this valley. The drought concern in this city and in this valley is considerable. So I just wanted to throw out there that this is not just a superfluous
I don't think it's
thing
superfluous.
that we could do.
I don't think it's superfluous,
this is very important.
but yeah, I think if we do the new growth that we're talking about, it becomes more attainable and less like we're dancing on the edge of a cliff.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Kristen. In your current budget, would this be something that you could be studying and looking into?
The irrigation, switching over parks
Right.
to irrigation, we look at that in systems that are old and that need replacement, but really, that usually comes through a capital improvement plan application, so that we can have a design and have a really good cost estimate for a project like this, of this magnitude.
Okay. So, Councilmember Pui, go ahead, Councilmember Mono.
Well, just to get to Councilmember Pui's goal, I'm wondering if we want to put some of this into CIP with a legislative intent that we review the CIP list and anything that has already been applied for with an eye towards what's going to save the most water. And maybe that's in parks, maybe it's in golf, maybe it's actually in something else. But we review the unfunded CIP list and put, I don't know, $500,000 to whatever is going to save the most water. And maybe we need to get Stephanie Dewar or somebody from Public Utilities to help us figure out what that is, but that I mean, that might be the fastest way to do it this year. But I don't know if that.
So would that be a straw poll?
Yes, so I'm making them all today. But Councilmember Pui, how much do you think you want to put into, or do you want to make the straw poll? 'Cause
No, I think you rounded this crazy idea into a more a real one. So I appreciate that. I think that your number maybe is something that is more accurate, and considering that one park costs more than $3 million. So, if we can find efficiencies in the whole system and it's not only in the parks, I'm totally down for that. So I support that, Darren.
Okay, so there's straw poll in a nutshell. It's like to put this as an intent for using CIP funding to study it and then possibly initiate it.
So, but would we also put part of it into the CIP? I mean, that's what we traditionally do anyway, right?
I think that,
But
sorry, that would
it's so
be,
big
that would be the
already.
smartest, I think, from even a budget policy perspective, because it would give that money, it would give time to identify those projects, because that money would not lapse to fund balance.
Okay, so 500,000 from this 2.4 that we have into CIP with a legislative intent that 500,000 be used to whichever project saves the most water.
Okay.
Is
I'm
that
just worried-
what
I'm
you
just
want,
worried-
Councilmember Pui?
Yeah.
Does that sound?
I'm just worried about putting a number there instead of, we don't know what that number is, instead of putting 500,000, let's
So 500,000 is the maximum of CIP project, right? Or the minimum?
No, 50 is.
It doesn't-
Some people think that, but
That's
it's not.
is that the maximum constituent request is 500,000? That's why I remember that number. Okay. So I guess it's not, yeah, it might not be enough.
Or maybe, I'm just trying to.
Or might be way too much, I don't know.
Okay, but so you're taking it out of this new growth money, so the balance that we have right now. Why not use existing CIP money that may qualify for this, and it's sitting there dormant?
You would then have to figure out which projects you're not going to fund.
Well, no, because I thought we could add money that we have existing that it's
That's $150,000.
that it's $150,000.
150. So what Ben and Finance identified was $152,000 to recapture.
That's the piggy bank of or the couch cushions.
Oh, okay. Right, okay, but still, we still have 14, regardless. Ben, you told me that we have more money that we can add to CIP, sitting in different pots of money.
So I think you're referring to the unallocated parks impact fees balance.
Which
So
would
that's-
not be eligible for
Okay,
this
but
kind of
that's-
project.
So we have $14 million in unallocated park impact fees money. Okay, all right. Thanks for the clarification, because then that makes sense now. Great. So this would not qualify?
No.
It has to be a new park or a new amenity in a park
Not
that
Has
doesn't
to
exist?
add service.
Okay.
Add service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating.
Director Wright,
That is the
Right.
Director Riker.
I think there's two options here. One of them could be just a study to look at all of the parks and the irrigation systems and to understand which ones are the least efficient and the costs that it would take to upgrade those least efficient parks. So that's one piece. And then the other piece, I think, is what Councilmember Puya is saying is, let's actually do something and change the irrigation. So those are two different things, and I guess in your straw poll, it would be nice for us to know which or both what you're proposing in this.
Do you need a study? I hate studies, but but I know they're necessary sometimes.
So Resolution 29 asks us to understand the design and the cost estimates of our projects, and so that's a little bit, it puts us in a hard position because I don't know how much to tell you to put in for a project to upgrade something. If you want to just put in amount, we can look into it and try to figure out which size of park would fit what you're trying to do and use that as a demonstration park and or a large park, it's up to you. But if it's just an amount, then we would do the homework to try to figure out what it's going to cost, put together the construction documents, and then do a construction project.
I look to you for the, how do you want to?
Councilmember Puy, do you?
I think the study will be useful. I can see that. I also, waiting for a study to be completed a year and whatnot from now, and then the cost also switching from now. It's either the chicken or the egg, and it's just complicated to pick one or the other. I think they're both needed. I don't know how other council members feel about this, so maybe this is just wasted time. But I think water is one of the most precious things, and I was reading the concern of this summer, and I think that we need to do something about it.
I'm all agreement with that. We need to do something about it, but I'd also like to know where we want to start and spend our money. So I'm all for it, but I'd like to know if we allocate $100,000 and do it in this park or $1 million. So I think the idea that we need to know where to spend the money and how much we can spend would be nice to know. And you may not like studies, but sometimes you need that study to make your right decision.
Councilmember Fowler had a question.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, just, Mr. Chair, we do have some work already done in this area. There was quite an extensive review that was done based on the idea of, what's the ESCO, the saving money thing. So it's safe to know that no matter what amount you put in, it can be used in this direction. So they do have, it isn't as though they don't have any information. I think you do have some things that you you know about a lot of deficiencies.
We understand the age and the condition of our systems, so we could probably pick a area that is in high need. That would be pretty easy for us to do. I don't have the estimates on
Of
what
course
that would
not.
cost.
Yeah. So study's good, but there is some.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. I would have, anyway, sorry about that, and that I'm just joining the discussion. But this 2-point-something million isn't in stone yet, is it, Jen?
It's not.
So we're
and
spending money, pretend money, monopoly money right now?
I think it is likely that there will be some extra money, but the exact amount is, it's not.
So if, let's say we lucked out and it was this 2-point-something million, if that's the case, it goes into the general fund, right?
Right, which is where the council's allocating it.
Sure, but then we could come back in a budget amendment and have this discussion after Kristen comes back and says, oh, by the way, all of the work that Cindy just mentioned, we know that these 5 parks are the things that could happen. And we wouldn't necessarily need to allocate any money to CIP right this moment. We could let it fall to fund balance with the intent that if we have this money, knowing that we want, with the legislative intent that we want to look at parks and irrigation and these things, and then come back and have that discussion when we have, 1, more knowledge on how much money we have, and 2, more knowledge on some of these past studies.
I think that the challenge, I think, yes, the council could absolutely do that. The challenge would be that it would compete with all the other budget amendment requests that might come up in the year, and the council would have to weigh those options,
Sure, which
like you always do.
is what we do every time we
Right.
get a budget amendment. But again, we could put a legislative intent, and maybe it's an intent solely for us more than anything, that this was a priority in the discussions during budget, for us to be reminded of that.
Right.
Okay.
I withdrew my thought, or I guess it's Darren Manos' motion. He could potentially continue to do it, but I think that is a good argument to this. I would like to say that Councilmember Fowler saying that we should look into a budget amendment on this is something to note. So I would like to. I think we all agree that this is a big issue, and maybe we can wait until we know how much money this is.
Okay, I'll withdraw my straw poll then.
So we'll just leave it in the intent category. Okay. Thank you.
May I suggest something? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
Could I suggest that we ask Parks, sorry, Kristen, I'm putting you on the spot, but you don't have to come up here, just to come back with some of that information that Cindy mentioned maybe we can put it on a future date so that we can kind of determine what we're interested in. Does that work? Thanks. Kristen is nodding yes. Sorry, giving you more work. Yay.
So, Mr. Chair, we mentioned revisiting a straw poll. I don't know if you want to do that. It's Councilmember Mono suggested to shift some, and he calculated approximately 25% of groundskeepers from part-time to full-time. Director Riker responded that we could use a placeholder amount, and she would return to the council with exactly how many people that would convert, but that you could put in any number there. And so the number that he threw out was 600,000, and then it was a split vote.
And
So,
go ahead.
yeah, we had talked about the 2 parks FTEs that we had removed and combined into one, and I was thinking about how you were talking about the pyramid was inverted, and really I think the best way to build the base of that pyramid in parks is to get our groundskeepers to not be seasonal and to become full-time, because I'm worried that used to be a really attractive job for people entering into our city, working in our city, but now that it's still seasonal, we still don't offer benefits, there are a lot of other entry-level jobs that people can take outside of the city that I don't think we're getting the people in the city. So I want to work towards making all of those groundskeepers full-time with benefits, just like the rest of our city family is. And so my thought was, in the budget presentation, Director Riker gave us a figure of $2.4 million to change all of them over. So I just divided that by 4 and said with 600,000 we could do a quarter of them. I don't know if that math is real and if it really works out that way with HR, but it seems close. So that was the straw poll.
And on the other side of it was that, though we agree that we want to make sure the parks, the health and safety and the maintenance of our parks is good, at this point in the budget and this point of the future budgets, I think it'd be wise for us to look at that in the future, because we have a lot of funds that we need to use for next year that are coming out of fund balance, and we don't want to burden ourselves with additional costs that we don't have money for to pay for in the future. So we kind of looked at 3.3 and we said, hey, we know we have the need, but let's not allocate the funds for those extra FTEs at this point. Let's look at it in the future when we may have some more money, because right now our revenue is short for the future. So I think we should let Councilmember Fowler, because we're throwing a lot at you at this point. So continue on this, and then we can come back to you. And if you have some questions, we can go then.
So let's see, the other idea I heard, aside from putting all of this money into fund balance, is adding funding for auditing. And I wanted to clarify, the council office budget does have an existing line item for audits, and we actually have encumbrances from previous years for audits. And so I think, and I don't want to speak for Cindy, it's accurate to say we could start that process without necessarily adding money into our budget, and would likely not be able to.
So the move towards efficiency would be started with efficiency?
Right? Yes. Win-win.
Like I'm all over this.
I think that in previous years, the council has decided on audits based on a specific topic, like police reform, for example, or business licensing. But if you just wanted us to kind of systematically go through the departments with the efficiency lens, I think we could start doing that. And we could even work with our consultants to figure out an efficient way to do that.
We actually wouldn't even have to put out an RFP, because we have firms on contract that are reserved for just this purpose, so the council maintains its flexibility.
Just speaking in terms of human-to-human communications, is this something that, are we adding to overtaxed departments an onerous burden that's going to cause them to cry? Do we need to lay some groundwork? And
Yeah, I think we would come back to you with some possibilities. It wouldn't be like instantaneous or anything like that, but and then we could coordinate with the administration on. No one has extra time,
No.
but there may be some that could get done sooner, and others that should wait until later.
I was going to say, I think because of the work being done on the ERP, we may want to be especially cognizant of certain departments, but I don't think there's plenty of things to look at.
Well, and I just think the decision-making around the police department feels like it's on such sure footing because that audit was done, and it made apparent so many different things, and I'd like to be able to do similar things in other departments.
And the council did do that for many years. They rotated audits amongst departments, so
Yeah.
it's entirely.
And it is a workload for the department staff, and that's why I think that coordinating with the administration about, which departments it makes sense to start with would be helpful.
And it's usually a collaborative process, and it's in keeping with the international audit best practices to include the department in developing the scope, so that if there are things that they already want to know, so we're not imposing it on them. They can add things that they would like to know.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Pui.
And related to audits, is the audit focused on efficiencies of staff and procedural stuff, or financial, or both?
It could be anything. It could be anything and everything that you want it to be. We craft a scope for each audit depending on what the council's interested in at the time, and so we've done both and all.
And there are times when it isn't practical to do an audit. We did some follow-up work with the building and permitting group and on an audit, and really they needed to focus on getting the permits out the door. So they did not have time to, I mean, they recognized that it would be helpful to incorporate some efficiencies, but right now they just need to get the work done. So we have to just be aware of those sort of things.
Councilmember Baltimore.
Thank you.
No, Jen, so in the past, how did the council do it? One department a year, two departments a year, like how?
One or two.
1 or 2 a year? So, okay.
Yeah.
So if you guys can give us like a schedule or like this, how many departments?
I think we would
this
need
is
to, I think we would
when?
need to work with the administration. That would be our first step, just because of the ERP taking so much of departments' times right now. And to figure out which department would realistically have the time, kind of like Cindy mentioned with building services. We might think that it makes sense to start with, X or Y department, but if they don't have the staff capacity to be helpful in the audit process, then it's not efficient. And
in some cases, it'll be like where you might choose a division rather than a department. And we would still work through the department, but you might want to focus on just one division if there's something that you feel particularly interested in.
But I think our goal for this, or like our idea, I think, I'm not speaking for Victoria, but my vision for this audit is so that we have a somewhat a better understanding for next year budget of where we need to slim down certain things, because we will still be $25 million short, essentially, for next year's budget.
You
so.
won't get there with that tool, because you can't achieve, you can't audit we do audit the entire city in terms of the
compliance.
the required audit and that kind of a thing, but this would be a several year process, and it would talk about best practices and the efficiencies and things like that. We wouldn't be able to audit all city departments we'd be able to do 1 or 2 a year. So,
Well, and I think what I'd like to get to eventually is to a place when we have 2.4 million that we can play with, we're responding to actual priorities that we've been able to quantify or qualify using these objective standards, instead of us surmising that maybe this would be the best way to use money or maybe that would be the best way. I'm all for pet projects, and I think they make life worth living, but I'm worried that we potentially are missing more structural, important things, especially because right now our city is in such a growth trajectory, and we are in such a state that we haven't ever been in before, that the only way to navigate this, to me, is to have that objective data when we're sitting at tables like this, having conversations like this.
yeah, and one of the things, and that I understand, the thing is that you can, we don't want to do that to the extent that it removes your judgment as elected officials, because that's the whole essence of the system. So you want to have that to inform your decision, but you may not. And you may see that there's the greatest need in this area, but it really isn't the priority of the constituents. So then you all have to weigh all of that.
Rachel? I think you came up for a reason.
How did you know? Thank you, Council Chair. I just wanted to remind all of us that with the continuation of project-based budgeting and the expansion of that into different departments, that may be a way to gain some efficiencies without, a lengthy auditing process. So maybe it's something that, if you chose, could be revisited after we see how that rolls out in different departments too.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilmember Fowler.
I appreciate that, Rachel. And to Cindy's point too, I think, we saw the in-depth police audit because we needed to. And I think, there was a lot of things happening and a lot of call from constituents on both sides. And I think when we're looking at audits, they are helpful, and sometimes we've done like little mini audits on certain things, but I think it also is kind of prioritizing when a need arises from either our state or like current state of the city and or constituents and or concerns. And so, does that make sense?
And I think my response is that there is that element, right? Like if you talk to any builder in the city, they contend that we are the slowest, most cumbersome place to work. I contest that is not true. That's just the narrative when they're talking to someone representing the city. But we are in a new paradigm. We added electronic things, like there are all sorts of new things that I think it would really behoove us. I think we have the best people working on things, but I'm not convinced we've helped the systems around them work smarter. And I'm convinced that we may be inadvertently asking them to work harder. And then as we're making decisions with where to put things, I think that kind of data will work. I don't think we look at well-functioning things and say, well, let's just dig into this for no reason. I think, if I had my way, I would start with those things that are revenue generating, the permitting, the engineering, those things where we get repeated concern.
I welcome the discussion. Councilman, or Cindy, go ahead real quick.
Sorry, just one quick thing, and it is very possible that audits could come back, some of them, to say, you're costing, you can get more done, but it will cost you more money. So, yeah.
I love the discussion. I love the
Over
discussion.
$0. I'm just going to point out.
I appreciate the discussion. I think we need to move on some the other topics. So back to the original in question was on the audit side of the house. Do we need a straw poll on this or any?
I don't think we do because we have a line item for audits
Okay.
in the budget already.
Okay.
In our council office budget. It's just helpful to know that the council is interested in doing that. So we'll come back with more information on how to proceed in conjunction with the administration. It seems like people might need a little more time to think about how to allocate this extra general fund money. So maybe I could pivot to some easy things that the council could weigh in on about the library and governmental immunity.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
So let's see. So in addition to the city having preliminary data for new growth, there's preliminary data for the library fund having new growth. The library fund did have a placeholder of $375,000 of new growth in their budget. The actual, or at least the preliminary actual new growth for the library is $746,000. So the council could decide to either have that extra, $314,000 go to the library fund balance where, let's see, actually it's $371,000. Go to library fund balance or reduce the proposed tax increase for the library by that amount of new growth.
And again, you have the problem of not knowing if that is certain.
Right. And so I guess we would say we would put a placeholder that whatever the actual new growth is, it would just be adjusted by that amount.
And when you're talking about putting things into the fund balance or capital accounts, in all cases, you're almost like parking it there.
Yeah.
I think part of the library's idea was that they wanted to have some build up their fund balance so that they could have some more funds for capital projects. And this fund is uncertain.
But because the council sets the tax rate for the library fund, that's why, and council members have asked quite a few questions about the library tax increase and impact on homeowners. That's why we flagged that as an option.
Right.
How much is the library tax increase?
2.8 million. And so we calculated if the council did back out, it did lower the tax increase from 2.8 million to 2.4 million. It would change the impact on a homeowner, on an average home, from $24.62 to $21.33. So $3.30 a year.
And
Go ahead,
for
Councilmember
how
Ward.
many? I'm sorry. And for how many years would that be? Is my question. Like,
It's in perpetuity.
no, I'm sorry. My question's kind of rhetorical.
Oh.
Like, yes, we could cut that amount in this budget, and then come back in 1 year, 2 years, and have to do another increase because when we should have captured that $3 before. is my rhetorical feeling on this.
Is that
Yes.
the right
I mean, I think
line of thought then?
it's sort of like what we talk about with the general fund is paying now or paying later. I think that you could absolutely justify reducing the tax increase now. I think that the library fund is very likely, it's just like any other department with growing needs.
Yeah. So it isn't that there's extra for them either. It's a matter of they could, if you leave that in their budget, they could start to address a few more of the long-term needs that they've already identified.
And so in this maybe actuals, I put it in, the actuals maybe, the 746, this is also ongoing, correct?
Yes.
Jen? So we'll capture it every year from now on.
You would, yeah.
Okay.
It will know that this line item comes from the county also, just like our property tax line comes from the county too.
Right.
So those are the unknowns. So the question is on the table is that do you allocate this additional
Money and fund
money
balance.
into fund balance or into the property tax? The fund
Or
balance
reducing the property
or
tax
reducing
increase.
the fund balance by that equivalent amount, which is possibly a couple bucks a month, a year.
I understand where everybody is coming from. I think it should go into the fund balance, but may I just ask that we be sensitive of saying, it's only $3 a year. To some people out there, $3 a year could be a lot. So I recognize that it's only $3 a year coming from all of us sitting here and where we're at. So I do think in this case that it could go to the library general fund because they have a lot of projects that need to be done. But I would just ask that we be sensitive of how we address that.
Good point.
I agree. I think though we need to be careful of I think we all need to be really careful about the language that we're using because I think with the discussions that we've had so far today too, it almost makes the impression that there are all of these perceived areas where we're wasting money or where we're spending beyond our means or not being fiscally responsible or all of those things. And just because we're having to have a conversation about raising taxes doesn't mean that it's because of inefficiency in the government or it's because because government's getting bloated. And so I think I agree with Councilmember Fowler, but I think we need to be careful on the other side too, because we know in this room, maybe we know those of us on this council know better than anybody else in the public how hard our city employees work and how excellent our bond ratings are because of how responsible we have been fiscally, even when we're trying to advance policies that are progressive. We are incredibly fiscally responsible. And I don't want residents to listen into this conversation and think that we're not being careful with their money or that we haven't been careful with their money leading up to this point.
Thank you. So does anyone want to make a straw poll on that topic there?
I will. I would poll that we put whatever new growth above the proposed tax rate go into the library fund.
Fund balance.
Fund balance.
If I could add,
Fund balance.
thanks.
Library fund balance.
Thank you.
Got it.
Yeah. That's a straw poll. Any questions? Okay, we got six.
I'm confused. Sorry. Put it back. So yeah, we're putting it in the general fund balance of the library.
Yes.
And
Library.
then, but then we will continue.
In future years, so for example, in next year's library budget, they will be able to propose what to do on an ongoing basis with that money.
Okay, and not put that money to lower the 2.8 million.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
no.
So we have a
6 to
6 to 1.
Great. Thank you. The next item is governmental immunity. The state law sets a maximum of 0.0001, 0.0001, yes, right, 3 zeros, on this item. And so with the total taxable value in our city, the maximum that the council could establish this fund for would be 3.78 million, not the 4 million proposed by the mayor. I've checked in with the administration, and they would recommend setting the budget at that 3.78 million so that it can do what was intended, which is kind of build up an insurance fund for future years. But it's up to the council what rate to set. So I just flagged that as an option.
Up to 3.78.
Up to
We can only
3.7.
go down
Right,
from
and the recommended expenditure budget is 3.1 million. And so, you know, anything above that, because anything below 3.1 million and you wouldn't be funding it enough. And I believe that you had, the council had taken a straw poll in one of the earlier unresolved issues discussion that you did support funding this with a tax line item and that you wanted to come back once we knew the exact amounts. And so that's where we are.
So the maximum tax amount comes out to be now 3.7 some odd money.
Right.
I know that the staff report said 3.9, but so that's just the mathematics on that.
Yes.
And then earlier the proposed, you said it was 4, so not 4, not 3.9, 3.7.
Sorry. I think I need to check with finance to make sure I'm referencing the right total value. But either way, it's either
maximum.
3.7 or 3.9. Does the council want to set the maximum?
And that's the maximum.
Right.
Right. So do we want to set the government immunity tax line item at the maximum rate?
See, Darren.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to suggest we just do 3.5 million as the top, and then we can, it semi lowers it, but it gives us this, but I'm fine with 3.7. What's another couple $1 million?
So I didn't know, Chris, you have a thumbs up, or where are you on that?
Councilmember Pui.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask for clarity. I'm confused about the straw poll. Sorry.
So because of the total taxable value in the city, the maximum that the rate could generate is 3.7 million. Does the council want to set it at that maximum rate or something less than that? And I believe the straw poll is to set it at the maximum. Okay.
So I got, Pui, I think, did you have it summed up before? Okay, gotcha.
Just for clarification, another thing for the public that is listening, governmental immunity is something that we can require by law, so we're not making this up. It's something that it's available, it's a tool available for municipalities to indemnify workers,
Right.
Staff that may have an accident, may sue the city, but also for a lot of lawsuits that we get because of the police department. And so those ticket items, if the public has been following, sometimes have been really large. So we would be covering some of those as well with this money,
Yes.
if we have future ones, which I hope we don't.
Right.
Okay.
It would basically be like an insurance fund.
An insurance fund.
Yeah.
So when we have to pay somebody out, then this is where that money comes from.
And
And it's not only the police department. The police department is a big chunk, but I just want to clarify that there is some big ones over there in that list that we saw that are not related to the police department. And
Yeah,
it's,
correct.
I think it is
So-
smart. It is smart to put money into this saving just in case.
Thank you. Councilmember Fowler.
sorry, I'm going to ask the chair to turn the time over to Katie Lewis, please.
Thank you. Katie Lewis.
Hi there, thank you. I just wanted to go ahead and say that the city receives claims on a variety of matters. We are an enormous corporation, and so lawsuits and claims can come from any variety of situations, and it's not one particular department or one particular claim.
Right. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, so I
So
think
the straw poll on the table was
Setting it at the
in
maximum.
at the maximum taxable allowable limit. Okay, so
That's
back to
for
the
that.
straw poll. And I
Great.
got
Sorry. sorry.
I have
I'm
six,
still-
I have
I'm
six.
still, I'm not voting yet. One moment. One more question. We said that we could, in the future, we could actually take it down. Like we
Yes,
can
you could-
remove this tax.
Yes, each year you set the rate, and so each
Okay.
year you will be evaluating that rate.
Okay, so that gives you a little bit of breathing room. It's not perpetual. If we didn't want it to be perpetual. If we didn't want to, we can change. Because let's say we don't get as many claims in the next 3 years, then
You could
we don't need
change.
this money. We don't need to be taxing people.
We'd always need a certain budget for it.
Right.
There are 9 FTEs in the attorney's office relating to this issue. So you'd always need money for this topic, but it could come from a variety of sources.
Okay,
Okay, so we have six,
all right.
seven unanimously.
Great, great.
Thank you. Let's take a break here for 10 minutes.
Okay.
We'll come back at 1:45. And we're returning to the unresolved issues line item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's see, I don't know if Councilmember Petro Eschler or Councilmembers Pui or Wharton can join. Maybe in the... Okay, will you text them? Hi, Chris. Hi there.
I'm here. I just have to turn my camera off for a minute.
Okay.
But go ahead and start
Okay.
if you're waiting for me.
Maybe in the meantime, we can clarify the next steps for CIP. We'll have a follow-up discussion to the extent you want a follow-up discussion on Tuesday. I just want to make it really clear here, and then we'll have it in the motion sheet as well, that the council approving the budget does not mean that the council is approving the specific projects in either the sales tax or the GO bond. That hopefully the council will figure out those project lists relatively soon, but they are not they're not necessarily approved when you approve the proposed budget.
Mr. Chair, may I? I want to just apologize that I kind of confused that at the formal meeting on Tuesday, but wanted to, so thank you for that clarification, because yes, we approved that part of the budget, but not the specific projects. And I think people were a little concerned that they needed to advocate for their specific project right then and there. So, but thank you for reminding me. And on Tuesday, I'll try to help that as well. So,
and it's for the public too to understand. I think that those conversations are still going on.
And
go ahead.
Mr. Chair, you said the sales tax and the GO bond, but it's also the just general fund CIP
right.
list is also not
not approved. There are specific projects that will be approved. There are specific things that will be approved as part of the budget. One is the required debt service payments. You know, we don't want to be late on our debt service payment. And there are a handful of others that have unique timing things, like the handheld radios the purchase needs to start at the beginning of the fiscal year. The $2 million for insurance payments for the city and county building needs to happen. And so those will be part of the annual budget, but we've kept all the others that are discretionary for your guys' discussion in the summer. We keep giving you the CIP, GO bond, sales tax bond list in all of these unresolved issues discussions, because I think it can help inform your decision whether to add to CIP or cut from CIP, because you can look at that list and think, if you want to add to CIP, you can fund some of the projects that are not funded, or vice versa. So anyway, that's why we keep giving you the CIP list, but this budget does not approve that list necessarily. That's later in the summer.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay. So back to the unresolved issues spreadsheet. Let me share. So the council decided on governmental immunity and on the library. And now we need to discuss how to allocate this preliminary information about new growth. And I don't know if anyone has starting questions. I think that we highlighted the proposal from Councilmember Mono to shift some employees from part-time to full-time to provide benefits. I'm just scrolling down there. Apologies. So I don't know if you want to start there, Mr. Chair, or if you want to start somewhere else.
Sorry, Council
sorry.
Chair.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was waiting for Kristen Riker to come back, because I think Councilmember Fowler may have a few questions on that. So,
I do have some questions. I can ask them and see if you guys have the answers.
Okay.
So do we know with the 600,000, and maybe even if Kristen's just like in her office or something, if you're listening, Kristen, I need you. But how many, if we funded this at that 25%, sort of that 600,000, how many employees that would be?
So in the earlier discussion, she said that she would have to come back to the council, because it would depend on which positions made sense to turn into full-time positions. So she didn't necessarily commit that it would be 25% of the employees, that it may be some amount less than that.
And it really couldn't possibly be, because 25% of the money wouldn't pay for full-time for 25% of the workforce, I don't think.
I mean, that seems to me to be a vital question in that, like, how much is this going to impact what we want it to impact? I think it's a good idea. I kind of have that question. And I think for me, looking at 600,000, I would say something I learned my first budget session from the mayor, then Councilwoman Mendenhall, is if you add something, you got to take something away. So I realize that we have this sort of this money that may or may not be there, but we also added 2 new FTEs for traffic calming. We added, how much did we add? Ben, we added something else for traffic calming.
200,000 for temporary traffic calming measures and $2 million from the holding account from CIP for traffic calming.
And I know how things are, and 60,000 for the street racing. So, and those are important, and I'm not trying to take them away. I'm asking which is more important. Like, we don't have, the credit card's gonna run out. And I'm just like, where do council members feel that there's more importance on these things? Or, you know.
So if I could clarify, I realize this is kind of coming out of left field as an idea. It was in the budget presentation, we talked about it, but I realize it's not something we've really discussed a lot. So I'm not going to be upset if it fails. That's not it. But when we're talking about what's more important than the other, the reason why I brought it up is because we had said, okay, we reduced the FTE out of public lands. Do we want to put it back? And for me, it's more important to make these seasonal employees full-time with benefits than it is to add higher level FTEs in public lands. And so I was saying, no, I don't want to bring that back. But if we are talking about putting money back into public lands, this is where I'd like to put it. So, but that doesn't mean we have to do it now. But I think in future budget years or budget amendments, if we can't get this piece where the seasonal employees can have benefits, I'm going to have a hard time approving higher, like, administrative staff before we can do that.
And I see the director is here if you have questions for her.
Sorry, Kristen, I know, but I think you're okay right now. Darren, I completely agree with that. And it is something that we have been talking about a lot. I just am looking from the standpoint of making sure that we're not overspending or spending money we don't have, or coming back with like, we can't do that. So it was sort of like, again, like I said, it's a lesson I learned my first budget. If you put something in, you got to take something out. And that sort of looking at what the council has already added was where I started in saying, if we're going to add these things, then are we going to take out these other things? Do we have the capacity to do all of it? Kristen, I may not need you, but I appreciate you running down here. Jen mentioned that you didn't know exactly how many employees this would make, or which employees this would affect, right?
Right, yes. So what I suggested is a dollar amount, if you wanted to do a dollar amount, and then we could tell you how many employees we could convert with the dollar amount.
And do you think, and I do, again, I agree on having the seasonals be permanent, and at least some of them, you know, Councilmember Pui brought up that in the wintertime, if trees or branches fall, and it's not like a significant thing, then it's difficult for parks to get out and clean it up because we may not have the seasonal workers during the winter time. And so, and I just want to support our employees and make it attractive to be here. But I think it is important for me to know, like, kind of which employees this would affect and how many, and what it would do to the park system.
Right, it would definitely affect the parks districts. So we have we have 8 park districts, but really the city is divided by 4. And so it would affect those staff. We would, you know, with a reduced amount, we'd kind of have to look at it again, like, would we just try it like as a pilot in one district to move all of them to full-time, or would we want to do it in multiple districts? And I guess to the question in the wintertime, a lot of people ask, well, what do the park staff do in the wintertime? And there really is quite a bit of work that they do in the wintertime. We try to do all our training in the wintertime, but in addition to that, people are still using our parks as much as ever, especially with the warmer temperatures and the nicer weather that we've had even in the winter. And when it's snowing and they're picking up branches, most of our park staff are also clearing walkways and doing snow removal as well.
Yeah, and I hope my comment didn't come off as me saying that there wasn't anything being done in the wintertime. I definitely see everyone out there working. It was more, would a full-time staff, like turning somebody from seasonal to full-time, also help benefit all of that work you're doing in the wintertime, which I assume it would, because you'd have more people working in the wintertime, right?
Absolutely.
So, Councilmember Mono.
Well, should I re-propose the straw poll then?
Yes.
So, okay, I'll restate the straw poll, which is to take $600,000 and move it into parks to convert as many as possible seasonal groundskeepers to full-time.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing so we can see Councilmembers
That's the straw
Wortman
poll.
and Hui.
Okay, so everyone voice your opinion. So we're 4-3, not in favor.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, again, I support this in the future when we know we have money to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So back to this money. I don't know if Councilmember Fowler wants me to read through what some of the other options. One was to just park the money essentially in fund balance, which would reduce the amount of fund balance being used to balance the budget this year. It would also be an easy way to adjust it if it ends up being 1 million instead of 2.4 million. The other option that staff raised is to allocate some to CIP to fund some unfunded projects.
Right, that's right, because we straw polled that, but we didn't have Councilmember Fowler's on that one. Did we?
Straw polled, sorry, which one?
Okay,
I don't
maybe
think we
didn't.
straw
Okay,
polled
sorry.
that one. Yeah. We discussed it briefly.
We discussed it, gotcha.
So I don't know if there's a preference among council members for.
I'd like to, diminishing the amount of fund balance we're using does not change the property tax that we're requesting, correct?
Correct.
That's what I would like to do then, is reduce the amount of fund balance. I'm fine with the tax increase we're asking for, but I'd rather we use more ongoing funds, less one-time funds.
Right, so this would actually, the money that the additional new growth would go into fund balance is what your straw poll is. Okay. That was a straw poll.
And to be clear, we could, if we get to CIP discussion, we're like, no, these are these 3 other projects that we really want to fund, we could just pull it out of fund balance at that time.
Right, yeah. We can, so I think I had I can't see Chris and Ali's
Oh,
hands.
sorry, I'll stop sharing.
So that's
just a
thumbs
sec.
up. I got 6 thumbs up.
2
Ali?
thumbs from Councilmember Pui.
So
I don't know if it works like that. But.
Can you say your straw poll?
We're putting it in fund balance, so we're using more ongoing, less one-time funding.
Okay, all right.
So that goes 7-0.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're balanced. Sorry.
Sorry, that's, Jen, did that include that we would be okay with an increase this year? Like with a?
No.
This only increase some money that we have left over, but we're not voting yet on the increase of property taxes overall.
That vote happens on Tuesday.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I think that we've been proceeding assuming that because council members didn't raise removing that tax increase, we're proceeding on that path. If you want to straw poll removing that tax increase, I guess that's a different option, but then you'd have to rebalance the budget.
We're $4 million out of budget.
Yeah.
Do we need to straw poll that? I mean, I'm assuming we have the 4 votes for it, but I would really like to confirm that before we have to do an all-nighter. All right, straw poll that we are approving the 4.9?
Sorry.
4.9.
4.95?
4.35. 4.9%. It's 4.35 million, 4.36 million,
Okay, which one do you prefer?
either one. You could just say the tax increase
Approve
proposed.
the proposed tax increase.
Property tax increase?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Can I say this is reluctantly, but there
Yes.
it is.
Yeah, I'm with you.
reluctant.
I'm with you, Amy.
That's 6-1 with Councilmember Baltimore not approving.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So we can pivot from unresolved issues. Just so new council members understand the process, staff will begin furiously preparing all of the documents and sort of background paperwork that has to happen in order to adopt the budget based on these straw polls. So while nothing is final until the council actually votes on it on Tuesday, is really, really difficult if things change between now and then, other than acknowledging that the property tax information may change, and that will adjust. We'll just adjust whatever goes to fund balance if it changes between now and Tuesday. So it's not like a speak now or forever hold your peace moment, but it's pretty close. Okay, so,
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Wharton.
oh, sorry, yes.
So if someone wanted to propose cuts to the proposed budget to like lower the tax rate or something, when would that need to come? When would we need to discuss that?
That would need to be today, now,
Okay, thank you.
right now.
Are you making a
That's what I
proposal,
thought. I was just wondering.
Councilmember Wharton?
No, I think, sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I would rely on, on our staff to tell us, okay, so we can do as is, or we can take these things out. Like, and that's something that I've been asking for, like, but I don't have that information, so it's hard to say, because I just been frustrated that I don't feel like we really have looked deeper on the things that we are going to fund. I don't think we have looked deeper on this whole budget, that we could have removed or reduced some of this property increases that ultimately the renters and, proprietors will have to pay. That will be directly that the renters will end up paying. So it's hard to say yes, because of the reality in Salt Lake City is rental prices, housing prices are ridiculous. A lot of people cannot live here, and adding a little bit more to the rent, it'll make it even harder for all of the people that we want to live here. So that's why I'm having such a hard time saying yes to a lot of things. So, go ahead.
Sorry,
Councilmember
Mr. Chairman.
Fowler.
I mean, respectfully, I think, to be honest, throughout all of the briefings, throughout the budget, staff has sort of mentioned where we could cut things and where the things that we could do if we wanted to reduce or get rid of this property tax increase. I think every briefing is sort of, the staff has said, here's an option, there's an option over here. And I think for me, I mean, I've been not a proponent of this property tax increase from the beginning, but as we look at the budget and look at the things to cut, those are jobs mostly. And I lament that last year this today comes from what we have done in the past with budgets, in my opinion. And for example, and this is no offense, but we made a completely new division last year, and that requires jobs and things. And so now we have to pay for it. And so I think and I don't want to make somebody lose their job. So and nor do I want to lower the services that we're providing our residents. So for me, as I mentioned, it's a reluctant thumbs up, but an understanding and a hope that in the future we're making a little bit better decisions as far as using ongoing funding for ongoing needs and one-time funding for one-time needs, and not vice versa. And so I think that, the idea that we haven't been given information about where we can cut things, I think we have. And to be fair, you could propose to cut anything you want. I mean, if there is something in the budget that you're like, I really don't want this thing, I think that we as the council have that power to say, you know, I don't want a new MRT in Sugar House. So there you go. Don't say that because I won't. But like, right? I mean, that's our role for the last 6 weeks or however it feels like 18 years that we've been meeting.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But what I have a beef with is exactly what you said. We're voting, you know, on something that you and I and another council member didn't agree with, trying to balance the budget. It seems like yeah, of course we need to pay for labor, and that's okay. But then maybe, you know, and this is why the audits are good, because it's, to me, in my mind, I don't want to make decisions on things that it's just maybe a perception, maybe, you know, my non-understanding. I want to understand where we could do these things that make sense. Understanding that labor, I don't want to cut people. But then where else, if we add something, where do we take out? That's where I'm coming from. And I don't feel like I have, maybe it's my own fault, maybe it doesn't matter, but that doesn't feel like I'm super excited about this and that I can comfortably tell my constituents, hey, you're going to pay more, but you're just going to get the same service, and that's it.
But
I don't disagree with you, but I think we can't go back in time. We made our votes last year, and you and I both voted no on certain things, but it still passed, and now we're where we're at, right? And I think one of the suggestions that was brought up in the beginning of the budget briefings from staff is, if you want to look at things, really we're adding a bunch of new programs, and that's the other option to cut from. But we've all talked about those and said that those are priorities to us, right? The chat team, the new MRTs, the more social workers, some of those were already in budget amendments, but that was brought up at the very beginning of the briefings when we first started this, and I think that we've done a good job at looking at those programs and deciding if they were a priority for us. So certainly I understand the frustration, and I feel you, and it's all there. And I think these are like lessons learned for the future and future budget amendments, and looking at where the money's coming from so that we're not raising taxes every year on and on and on, but making better long-term decisions on those things. But we made these decisions last year, and now we're sort of paying for them, which we knew would happen. And we said it was going to happen last year during this discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler. Councilmember Mono, then Councilmember Wharton.
thanks. I guess just to add my thoughts to the conversation, I don't think there are huge things in this budget that we can get rid of, because they're all things that we've talked about and that we wanted. And I know that the Public Lands Department is something that some people didn't agree with, but I don't think it's fair to say that we're asking our residents to pay more and they're not going to get anything more. I actually think there's a lot of new things in this budget that they're going to get, including all of the alternative response models, of course. Those are all expensive programs, but things that we need. And then I think the investments in public lands are beginning to pay off and will continue to pay off. And we know that even just to keep a base level of maintenance on our parks, we have to spend more money because A, people cost more, and B, more people are using our parks since 2020. So there's more use on that park, and the people to maintain the park cost more. So we can't not invest in that and expect the condition to not deteriorate. And I don't want our parks to deteriorate. I want them to get better. So I think it's, I feel like I can say, yes, we are asking you residents to pay a little bit more, but you're getting quite a bit more than you would have if we did not do that. And I feel comfortable saying that for those decisions. So I guess those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Mono. Councilmember Wharton.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think Councilmember Mono mostly covered it. And I know that, parks is an ongoing discussion. And yes, that was one of the ones where we had a split vote. But every other, that's not even a majority. That's not even the biggest piece of this budget, the parks. The biggest pieces of this budget are all of the parts that we voted on, not just last budget year, but through budget amendments and through previous budgets, and where we voted unanimously. That is the only split vote that I can think of that is implicated here in this budget. The vast majority of them were unanimous votes. And, what we've heard over the last, number of years is, especially in the sort of tumultuous years that we've had, the two most previous ones, we've heard residents telling us that they want a higher level of service, that they want services that better address their calls and their complaints, and there's no other way to do that. And I know that I think we're also creating more efficiency, because if we can have alternative response teams. Those are the biggest parts of the budget, other than the staff cost of living increases. And those alternative response models are things that we all unanimously supported, and they're things that overwhelmingly the public on all sides of the policing issue, like people on all sides of the policing issue, came forward and said that they wanted. Even our police, they're saying we can't answer all of these calls. We can't do the work that a lot of these calls are asking us to do, because we're just police officers, and a lot of these calls are not crimes. So it was like I was trying to say earlier in this meeting, like those calls aren't going to, it's not like we're creating this new government program to accommodate those calls. Those calls are already coming. Those calls are going to continue to come. And the only way that we can better respond to those calls is by adding these alternative response models that we've talked about. And the ones that we're adding, I'll say this as well, a lot of them are programs. They're not exactly new. They're things that we've been working on in the city. They were evolving, but they had their origins before 2020. And so these are programs that we've grown to fit the changing needs of Salt Lake City, and we've been collecting data on them since that time. The ones that are brand new are, we are looking at making, real systemic change to the way that we respond to emergencies, which I think is our number one charge as council members, is safety, public safety. And to answer those calls, both literally and figuratively, and get the right people connected to the right emergency to solve the problem, and both in the short term and the long term, get those people connected to the right resources. We have to build new programs that didn't exist before. And we committed as a group unanimously to doing that when this started in 2020. And this is a continuation of that promise.
Thank you, Councilmember Petro.
I've talked about this individually with most of you. This to me isn't a tax increase. This is us being in the crosshairs of a really precarious moment in our shared history, where we're adjusting and doing what needs to be done to maintain the reasonable level of service for this. And so, again, I am a single mom who lives paycheck to paycheck, who is pricing herself out of a housing market. So none of this is abstract or hypothetical to me. These are very real things. However, we have the responsibility to maintain services on several fronts, because we are the people who are laying the new track, because the old track has run out, and we have to figure out how to pivot into this 21st century paradigm. My constituents seem to respond to, and my message to them has been that whatever trust they place in us, as symbolically held by this tax increase, we will make sure every dollar does the work that it is supposed to do. And I think for me, that's the line. And that's why we have to acknowledge that as our city grows, the mechanism of our government has to grow to respond to it. Our job is to make sure the growth is commensurate and not erratic or in response to perceived needs, but to real needs, and that what we implement is well regulated and well understood, so that the continued investment and the continued growth trajectory is one that honors our constituents and the needs of our city.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I appreciate that. And I also want to appreciate all the efforts that the staff has put in over more than just the last 18 years. Oh, go ahead, Alejandro. Thanks.
Sorry, it took me a second to click. I appreciate you recognizing that I asked for time. Sorry, it's hard to call people's attention from here. But again, it is never easy to do something like this. But saying no to the tax increase again, and I'm going to reiterate this because I think this group has worked and this council staff has worked very hard on asking the hard questions. But voting no supporting this tax increase means no supporting our city employees. It means no keeping a savings account for our lawsuits. It means no supporting our deferred maintenance and our staff with the extra work they're doing. It means not doing traffic mitigation. It means not supporting our IMS with the bigger threat of cyber attacks. It means not supporting our growing city with more firefighters. It also means not supporting our victim alternative response to policing and our, all the other amazing work that this council has done before I joined in. It also means not supporting our parks and our open space. And I wish I could have found the millions of dollars that we have to make, but I haven't, and I believe that this is a solid budget, and this is why I support it. And again, like Councilmember Petro mentioned, this is not an easy thing to do, but our neighbors, and I speak for the neighbors in my part of town, want the city more visible, and they want to see things, and this budget does that. It keeps up with the growth that we've seen, and it addresses the issues that they're asking me to do. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's comments on this issue, and I also appreciate the staff's 24 hours a day response to all our questions and concerns and issues. So a heartfelt thanks for you guys. We're going to continue on wherever we are, Jennifer.
All right. Well, you're done with the hard part.
Okay, it's straw poll. Straw poll.
We do, and we can spend as much or as little time on this as you guys want. We haven't gotten to discuss legislative intents yet, and staff always takes a crack at them just based on your guys' discussion, but obviously the final wording is up to you and the final list is up to you, and so I don't know if you want me to kind of go through them and just say edits welcome, or...
Let's go through it, but I just want to make one public announcement. We're going to have a closed session after this discussion. We have a topic to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jennifer, with the...
And I'll add that these are potential legislative intents relating to the general fund. Staff is still working on potential legislative intents for the RDA. We will share those publicly as soon as we can, and we'll circulate them among you guys before Tuesday's meeting. So the first legislative intent is probably the biggest one, evaluating the efficiencies of all of the very diversified response teams. I think that we've discussed this ad nauseum, so I would just say, let us know if this wording works. And sorry, I should say, this is starting on page 5 of the staff report. And included in this legislative intent is asking the administration to provide specific information at 6 months and at 1 year so that the council can evaluate. And it's that list under B. So clarifying the roles of each team and how a call for service is routed from one to another, track as much data as possible. So to Councilmember Petro Eschler's point about metrics, we don't, because these teams are literally being created right now, I think that it's fair to say that we don't know what data we need. And so I threw it out there that we want to track all of it. So that we can refine in future years what metrics make sense to kind of continue tracking, and then find ways to share this data with the public and council in a coordinated way, and inform the public and other levels of government as these programs are rolled out. One of the things that I think we're surprised is how little other levels of government, the state, the county especially, know about what we're doing because we don't often tell our story. And so just making that a concerted effort. So if council's generally good with that.
Yeah, generally,
Okay. Great.
I'm looking for a thumbs up from Chris.
Chris, you're really small, so make
Yeah.
a big gesture.
And Ali, I don't have your camera yet. Okay.
Thank you both.
I think that's all 7.
Sorry, it's because I'm sharing the screen. Okay, these next few items were raised in recent discussions, and so this is just sort of a random collection of legislative intents. One is for free fare in the winter months. I believe this was Councilmember Dugan's suggestion. And maybe I don't think we need a straw poll on each of these, so maybe we'll treat it like budget amendments where I'll just go down the list, and if you have a problem with it or want to change it, just speak up, and then otherwise I'll assume that there's generally support.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got thumbs up.
So free fare in the winter months, asking the administration to build on the success of last year. Expediting traffic calming projects, asking the administration to evaluate the workflow among CAN and public services to identify bottlenecks and return to the council with suggestions. This references the sustainability holding account. So there were a couple of items that the council wanted to have additional conversations with sustainability before releasing funds, and this kind of talks about that. It also references the discussion that the council had about what role sustainability plays in the community. Is it a doer or a convener? The next one came up recently, an ombudsman for tenants. That is the intent of the council to ask the administration to explore the addition of a tenants ombudsman in the Good Landlord program, given the increase in the renter population in the city. It's not necessarily committing to adding it, because obviously that would mean money, a lot more money, but it would be helpful to have the information. This is covenants education in the Good Landlord program that the council asked the administration to include training for property owners on CC&Rs, and that it should also include implicit bias in those training materials. And I should say we've asked the attorney's office for kind of a review to make sure we're not accidentally stepping over the line of administrative authority. So most of these are requests of the administration, and then the administration will either come back to us with information or a response. The next is a holistic review of the consolidated fee schedule in conjunction with the finance department at a future date with an equity lens, and evaluate whether to increase, reduce, or eliminate city fees. The next is grants and ongoing programs. So looking at the extent to which programs in the past have been created with grants, where costs have continued beyond the life of the grant, to inform a future policy for evaluating when and whether it's appropriate for the city to create new programs with grants. I don't know if that captures that
was
particular.
That was definitely mine. And no, I think that captures what I was thinking.
Great.
I have a question on this one.
Yeah.
Do we want to make the wording even stronger and say that the legislative intent is that we produce an ordinance about, is this something that you imagine having an actual ordinance that governs when grant money can be used, or?
Go ahead, Cindy.
It gets a little difficult to anticipate things in an ordinance, so it might be end up to be like policy language you could use, or you could develop it later into an ordinance. You could do a resolution. So first looking at it might be the...
That's what I was anticipating, is what Cindy said, is just getting that information and you know, like we did an ordinance about one of the grants with military grade equipment, right? And so I think if it seems that there is an ordinance that could develop out of it, maybe. But first, I think it's just really, it's more of a policy discussion for me.
Okay, great.
The next legislative intent does not have words, and it's not in your printout because it came up today. So a legislative intent to look at water efficiency projects is kind of what I heard. And would it be citywide?
Maybe water efficiency.
Conservation.
Projects, conservation measures, or conservation or water systems usage in the city.
Would you like to make that specific to irrigation and public lands or make it more broad to all use?
It'd probably be greater all, but if we go too broad, then we lose it. So I would want to focus first on the probably the largest water user, which would be the parks in one sense. So let's kind of focus it on that, and then take it from there. But let's focus
could we
on
do
that one.
could we do a phased legislative intent that would say first public lands, second this, or is there no? Does
Well,
it lose its
we could.
effectiveness?
I'm not sure what B or C is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to like check it all.
Yeah, it would be. But let's get that first one. But we could.
And another option, council member, would be next year to add an additional one.
I mean, I think we could also make it as specific as just, we want somebody to go through and look at the whole list of CIP projects and just keep it to CIP this year and tell us which ones are going to save water and which one aren't. Like, my thought is that, okay, we're moving towards this program-based budgeting, and we had all these columns, equity and air quality. I think water conservation should be one of those columns in the program-based budgeting matrix. But we don't have that yet for everyone in the city, so I thought was maybe we just do that for the CIP, but that was really more connected to Councilmember Pui's thoughts, and so it's a little
So it could be
random.
listed
but-
in exploration. You can explore adding that. That could be part of the intent. And I'm thinking of a department like the airport. They may be doing a lot already, and they may be planning to do more. And so, certainly you'd want to know that it wouldn't probably be extra, it's possible it wouldn't be extra work for them. It might be just something that they can share with you, and it might inform your other choices that you're making. So it can be a little bit broad, and then the administration will help define it. And they come back to you pretty early in the coming year to say, here's what we understand from this intent.
Can I add something too?
Sure.
I think it's important, and I, just for maybe some of the newer council members, that, legislative intents are not binding on anything. And that we can't demand that they do what we say in a legislative intent. The administration is awesome at actually following through with a lot of our legislative intents and trying them. And every year with our budget, we go through the past legislative intents to modify them, keep them, get rid of them, see what we've done with them. And so, this isn't the first nor the last time that we will see these legislative intents. And so we can always, it doesn't take much to come back and be like, ooh, that's not working the way I thought it was going to work. Let's do something else or change that.
Yep.
So Jennifer, did you capture all of that?
I think so. I typed.
I figured you did.
So I read it, or I wrote, it's the intent of the council to ask the administration to evaluate water system usage in the city and make recommendations for future projects, and evaluate the list of CIP projects with a lens of water savings. Is that at least somewhat close?
I'm also looking at Kristen over your shoulder, if she understanding all that intent. Okay.
That's part of our system, is we work with departments afterwards to say, what did you mean by that? So that's pretty normal.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the next item is clarifying the role of community and neighborhoods and RDA as it relates to housing and land development. This is ongoing work, and I know the departments are continuing to work on it. The next is transition to chemical-free public lands. It is the intent of the council to ask public lands and golf to transition to chemical-free treatments for weeds and maintenance in future years, acknowledging that this may include, I'll say needed budget adjustments. See, I'm editing still. This is consistent with an existing sustainability department policy. The next item is youth and family program streamlining. It's the intent of the council to ask the administration to evaluate consolidating youth programs across the city under youth and family to increase efficiency and propose options for future budget discussions. Additionally, the council would like the administration to evaluate the city's role in youth programming in relationship to other community organizations to identify efficiencies and reduce duplication while factoring in overall community demand for those services. Next is additional information and metrics on police response and governmental immunity. This is one of those legislative intents that's like on ourselves, to keep ourselves remembering what we said we would do. It's the intent of the council to re-engage the council's consultant on police to see if there are ways to be more specific about minimum performance expectations, particularly as it ties to the city's requirement to provide legal defense for employees. Does that make sense? The next is governmental immunity claims. It's the intent of the council to consider retaining a consultant to examine whether and how other cities have tied legal settlements to departments where the claim originated. And the purpose would be to inform safety programming in various departments. That's what kind of insurance companies would do, right? Is use those experiences to inform what training, extra training might be needed. The next there were a couple of intents that related to the fire department, so I grouped those. Asking the administration to evaluate options for recouping costs for calls at the University of Utah, understanding that the administration will not be able to control that one necessarily. It would be a conversation likely at the state level, but just putting it out there. Asking the administration to evaluate the city's hazardous materials ordinance and implementation of that ordinance to capture revenue. And then asking the administration to continue evaluating options for electrified fire vehicles. This is actually a good example of something that the department is already doing, but the reason it's nice to have it in a legislative intent is because it documents that it sort of lends extra support for that department to keep doing that the council is in fact interested in understanding how you can do that.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question about 14B? I just don't know, the hazardous materials ordinance, is this like residents have hazardous materials on their property and that's illegal and we're trying?
It would be more like if the fire department responds to a chemical spill at a business, a manufacturing business, making sure that our ordinance is implemented to recover costs from that business because our ordinance allows us to recover costs.
And also, there's in the past when we've looked at it, there's money being left on the table because that could go to defer the taxpayer's expense because a lot of times the insurance anticipates covering some of those costs, especially if in certain categories of expense. So the city could take advantage of that.
So there's like a oil spill or some type of hazardous material accident. The fire department responds. We could actually charge the business for our firefighters' time and equipment, and then they would then get reimbursed by their insurance company. But right now, taxpayers are just paying that.
Right now, the ordinance exists, but there could be, it isn't often applied.
Okay.
So the idea is look at that ordinance to see whether there's still situations where insurance would pay, but instead we're asking the taxpayers
That all sounds great. Thanks.
The next item is asking the administration for a time frame about the boarded building fee. Then asking the administration to ensure that anytime the city is loaning or granting tax dollars that OTMA is followed. And I know that the attorney's office and recorder's office are working with the various city departments on this anyway, but this is, again, one of those issues to just document that it's an interest and to continue work on it. Then the next section is conditional appropriations, which is maybe the way to think about it is like one step stronger than a legislative intent because it means that money does not get released until the condition is met, essentially. So the first line item is relating to a couple of sustainability items, which is that funds will only be released after the department returns with RFPs or draft scope documents to the council, and that departments relying on previous resolutions come back to the current sitting city council for confirmation. And then departments may not rely on draft plans that have been adopted by the legislative body as the basis or building blocks for additional policy or budget plans. So go ahead, Cindy.
You just missed the word not. So if you have a draft plan, but it hasn't been processed by the administration, it's just making clear, or by the city council, it's just making clear that you can't continue to build more policies on that. The legislative body needs to do their part and weigh in on that plan in accordance with state law especially.
Councilmember Mono.
Why does that only apply to sustainability?
I think that's where the issue is raised, so maybe we can clarify if it's just sustainability or all departments.
I mean, I think it should be all departments, right?
Yeah.
Probably. We could just come.
I think the issue with making it all departments, though, sorry, just thinking of it, is that then you would have no way to meet the condition. Like, then every department's money would all be held. So contingent appropriations are just more difficult because, like, finance needs to be able to say, this condition is met. So maybe that's a legislative intent?
Yes, we could do that, or we could also, we've been thinking of coming back to you with some amendments to the ordinance that requires the departments to check in on master plans. It could be, it's a resolution now, it could be amending that, but intent language would make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe
The
I'll put it there.
sustainability one, I would suggest that it still be a contingent.
Yes, the RFP one is easy because that is an easy thing to check and see, did it come back to the council and the funds can be released.
I guess maybe I don't remember exactly which funds we're tying to this condition.
To say, but
Their whole department?
we had the EV chargers.
Yeah, the EV charging station and the electrified transit are the ones that are going specifically into the holding account. But this would apply to any RFP or scope that sustainability is doing that the money couldn't be released until it's been reviewed with the council.
Got it. Thanks.
The next item is any appropriation relating to capital expenditure for the airport, sorry, I should say. Any appropriation relating to capital expenditures on parking lot is contingent upon the airport consulting with UTA and reporting back to the council on expanding transit opportunities in lieu of creating additional employee parking. Is that
And it's just the employee parking that's restricted, right? It isn't all parking?
right now it's all parking, but should I change it to employee?
I think you just intended employee parking.
Right, but relating to capital expenditures on, and I'm going to add the word employee parking lots instead of just parking lots. Okay.
Thanks.
I don't know. I think we should do all parking. There's an insane amount of reliance on single-user cars as the only vehicle, and they're static throughout the system. I think us keeping our finger on this pulse and all parking is not a bad idea.
And I was just worried that we were overstating your concern, so up to you guys.
No, I agree. Besides, they could, not that Bill would do this, but you could build a parking lot and say it's not employee parking, and then, and then it is, right? So I think all parking lots.
Okay.
This just popped in my head, but have we looked at expanding tickets to transit to tickets for transit to include airline tickets?
I think that they had initial discussions with the airlines on that. Sorry, you
I
might
don't
know more.
They might do that. I don't know. We
That
would have
already
to
happened?
ask.
We can find out.
We'll find out, yeah.
Yeah.
I know they've talked about it. They
Because
may
I think-
already do it.
I mean, yes, I'm with everyone else on this. And
All right, then the next item, and I realize we didn't have a chance to work with the administration on this yet, to identify which specific aspect of the police budget, but that the council make adoption of that portion of the police budget contingent on having the city's crime map back on the city's website. And I don't know if Cindy has any ideas about which portion makes
don't
sense.
remember
No, I
talking
think
about
we
this.
would need to coordinate with the administration on that. The crime map that shows the hot spots, so to speak, isn't right now being published or created perhaps. And so there were council members who were saying they really would like that. The chief's response was that it could be one of the things that the new data analyst person does, but there's so many things that are being expected of that person. And this is probably a pretty quick fix. So if you wanted it done sooner rather than later, because I know you have constituents asking for it, then you could just say you can't access this little piece of your budget unless you get that taken care of. One is contingent on the other. So it just depends how strongly you feel about it. If you don't feel strongly about it, then you wouldn't need you can do an intent instead of a contingent appropriation. It certainly wouldn't be applied to very much of the police budget. It's more of a message to say that it's important to you.
I'm not sure which portion of the police budget I'd say.
And Ben will work with the police department and Mary Beth on which portion makes sense.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have, but I also want to make sure that public safety is still there. We're not discounting some of the other uses.
It would be some
Mr. Chair?
small,
Yeah. Go
like
ahead.
$50,000 thing. or
Councilman Pui.
something.
Mr. Chair, this is something that in my area of town is important for me and the neighbors I represent. The maps are very useful for the police as well. Right now, we only have a list of calls on the police website, and it's also about transparency. And I think it's a duty to the public to show this. I feel very strongly about it, and I believe the chief told me that they're going to do it. So I believe it will be good to add a contingency, and I don't think that will hurt them in any way.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item, I stopped sharing the screen because this contingency has appeared every year that the council has done funding our future, and it's just to essentially commit ourselves to the thing we originally told the public that we would do: comply with the Fiscal Procedures Act, be transparent with the data. The one change that we made this year was instead of saying specifically that the administration can only spend funds in the 4 critical need areas, we took out the word 4 because now there are 5. And it's still, I think that the first year that this contingency was adopted, there was a lot of unknowns about sort of what the administration would put into place to be transparent. And I think it's fair to say that the staff in the city have really gone above and beyond in terms of being transparent and have a whole dashboard and website focused on this. And so I think that we're in decent shape on this one. But just to hold ourselves accountable each year, staff recommends that we adopt this contingency each year.
Thank you. Did we, seems like so long ago, but did we appropriate, in part of this budget, there's money from Funding Our Future to go into that 5th bucket to kickstart it?
Yes.
2 million?
2 million for parks maintenance.
Okay.
Yes.
And then administration will sort of decide the percentage it gets out of it, or if we're whatever projects as that continues, right?
Yeah. And the council went back and forth about like specifying percentages from
Oh, that's
Funding Our
right, you
Future
did
in
have
each
that.
category, and there are no percentages. And so it's kind of up to the council and administration each year, sort of how those buckets get divvied.
Sorry that I forgot that like whole conversation until you mentioned it, but I remember now, so thank you.
And then that's it for legislative intents. I think. Yeah, that's it.
So let's take
Easy
a,
peasy.
Okay, on the, do we want to continue, go to the closed session, or do we need to talk about the CIP programs follow-up?
We listed it if you wanted to have that discussion. Another thing on that agenda is previous year's legislative intents. We've listed it as a written briefing because if you want to just read through it and are okay with staff's recommendations about which ones to keep open, which ones to close, we're happy to just save us the time.
I'm just checking the swelling in the brain.
Yes, yeah.
And I think this would be a good time to take a 10-minute break and then come back for the closed session at that point.
Great.
Is that? Yeah, we should do that now so we can get prepared for that. So motion for this closed session.
Mr. Chair, I move that we enter into closed session for purposes of
Real estate.
acquisition of real property and advice of counsel.
Second?
A second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilman Romano. Any discussion on this item? Seeing no discussion on this item, roll call. Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Mono.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Mono. Pui.
Yes.
Orton.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously, 7-0. We'll come back in at 3 o'clock.
And for council members Wharton and Pui, just plan on staying
at
on
3.
this same WebEx link.
Report back at 1500 hours.